Hi, I'm Corinne Smith, and this is the second episode in the series where I talk about resources that you can use to study the writings of Henry David Thoreau. Again, I'm not going to offer interpretation. I leave that up to you. In case you don't know me, I've been a fan of Henry David Thoreau since I read Civil Disobedience and Walden in high school in the 1970s. And Henry has stayed in my head ever since, so to speak. I worked as a librarian for a long time. In the last 20 years specifically, I've been researching and reading and writing a lot about Thoreau. And I have two books about him. One is Westward I Go Free, Tracing Thoreau's Last Journey, which is about his trip to Minnesota in 1861. And then the middle school biography and activity book called Henry David Thoreau for Kids, His Life and Ideas, with 21 activities. They both came out a few years ago. I am currently the supervisor of the shop at Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts. I work for the Thoreau Society, but I want to make clear that I am doing these episodes on my own. And what I say here is my own endorsement as a Thoreau fan and a Thoreau researcher, and not an endorsement by the Thoreau Society in general. However, if we sell the book at the shop, we've made a conscious decision to do that. All of the books that I'm going to show you today are on www.travelswiththoreau.com. And each episode of the series has its own bibliography with its own places where you can find the books. Full disclosure, the links are going to be to the shop or to an aggregate website where the links will give you to used book dealers. So our topic today is Walden, okay? Editions of Walden, Henry David Thoreau's most famous book. 2,000 copies were first printed and released on August 9th, 1854. And over the years, they sold out eventually. And near the end of Thoreau's life, he worked out a deal to get it reprinted. The second edition came out soon after he died. But at that point, it has not been out of print since. There have been hundreds of editions of Walden printed in many different languages. And whichever one you start out with is probably going to be your favorite. I always show mine. This is the one that I bought at the Walden bookstore at the Park City Mall in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in the spring of 1975, because I was taking a semester course in my senior year in high school. And it was going to be one of the books that we were going to read. And I knew it was going to be important, so I bought my own. So this has all my underlinings in it. This edition also has Civil Disobedience in it, which I think is nice. Some editions do this. I have to admit, this is well worn and taped, and I have to admit that I'm obsessed. Go figure. I'm obsessed, and I've bought other copies of it at book sales, library book sales, and used book dealers. Anytime I see it, I tend to buy it, even though I already have it. Okay, so other editions, I'm going to talk about a lot of other editions, but I'll show you some of mine. This is a German one that I bought in Munich in 1982. This is a French one that I bought in Quebec in 2019. And then here's one that's older. Here's one that's older. I just love old wood engravings, don't you? So this is from 1939 and Heritage Press, and the wood engravings are by Thomas W. Nason, Nason. Just love them. I love the feel of this book. Look at the decoration on the pages, the little spotted decoration, and just wood engravings. I mean, how cool is that? Walden is not usually illustrated, so finding this early, this is in 1939, is pretty cool. When I give public talks about Thoreau, this is the one I take with me because I have markers where certain passages are that I like to read. I have not befouled this with underlinings. That would be wrong. So I don't own a first edition of Walden, but here's a second edition of Walden. Now, like I said, it went out of print a little bit at the end of Henry's life, and he negotiated to get it reprinted again. And in the first edition, if you remember, the title is Walden, semicolon, or, comma, Life in the Woods. This was a style that was used a lot in the 19th century, and we still use it today. You know, you call a book one thing, and then in the subtitle, you further define it. So it was Walden or Life in the Woods. Now, at the end of his life, when he was negotiating with Ticknor and Fields, he asked them to take off the subtitle. So this is the second edition. It just says Walden. Drop the subtitle. Still has his sister Sophia's lovely line drawing of his house at Walden. So at the shop at Walden Pond, we sell between 8 and 10 different copies of Walden at any given time. Customers ask us which one is best, which one sells the most, which one is more popular. And I always kind of reluctant to answer those questions because it depends on your preferences. First, all right, you know, hardback, paperback, it depends on your preferences. The text itself is in the public domain, and so you should get an unabridged copy of it. You know, it's, meaning it's in public domain, anybody can make a copy of it. So, but get one that's unabridged, like I've said before. If you get one that's just excerpts, or you start out with a quote book that's just excerpts, I guarantee you are going to want the full text later. So the only differences in these books are packaging and the extras and certain other things. Some may be illustrated, some may have introductions by famous people or scholars. These are the kinds of issues that I'm going to bring up in this next few minutes. Remember, I'm not offering interpretation, can't stress that enough. Everybody comes to Henry with their own perspectives, and there are as many of those as there are people who read him. So there you go. A little bit of warning about publication dates, something else you should probably think about. A lot of publications come out in Thoreau world during the same years because they want to establish anniversary editions, okay? So 1962, that's the 100th anniversary of Thoreau's death in 1862. 1967 is sometimes acknowledged as Henry's 150th birthday, even though he only made it to 44. So 1962, 1967, and then we have 2004. That's the 150th anniversary of the publication of Walden. And of course, we have 2017, big year, Henry's 200th birthday. Happy birthday, Henry, even though he only made it to 44. So I'm dividing these Waldens into two categories. The first one, low tech, the first one is the basic Waldens. And the second one that I'll get to later are annotated Waldens. If you're pretty much set with the Walden you have, or you don't care about the things that we're offering currently, you might want to skip ahead 8 to 10 minutes, because that's when I'll get to the annotated Waldens, and you won't want to miss that, okay? Basic Waldens. If you want one without frills, without an introduction, the Dover publication with the original title, the full title, $5. It's a paperback. It's got the full text. Boom, there you go. Not much more to go with that. But if Thoreau is important to you, or if you think Walden is going to be important to you, and you want to do more looking around, here's more options for you. Okay, pay attention to hardback or paperback. Think about a little bit what you want to do with the book. Do you want to read it in your library at home, in the comfort of your own home, with your feet up and a nice beverage, hot or cold, sitting next to you? Or do you want to take it out in the field? Do you want it to fit into a backpack? Do you want it to be, I don't know, portable? Okay. Does it feel good in your hands? I think that's important. Of course, I was a librarian. Does it feel good in your hands? Is the type easy to read? That's going to become more important as you grow older, boys and girls, okay? Something to think about. And a few more other things to pay attention to. Who wrote the introduction? Do they have qualifications? And who published the book and where? Because now almost every copy has an introduction where somebody famous or a scholar gives a little bit of biography and a little bit of context, okay? And it may be good for you to know where the book was published, quite frankly. For example, this French Walden that I bought in Quebec in 2019 was published in France. I bought a book in Quebec that was published in France. I knew that going in. If I had wanted a Quebec-based book, I would have looked for one, but this is the one I got. And this one actually has an introduction by Jim Harrison, American poet who died a few years ago. It is in French, so I can't read it, but that's who wrote that, and that's where it came from. So back to English editions and the kinds of things that we sell at the shop and the kinds of things that are available in most bookstores today. All right, this one is from the Princeton University Press. It's part of the Princeton editions that are in paperback, okay? I'm not gonna talk about the Princeton editions a lot yet. They will be saved for an advanced episode. For now, what you need to know is that scholars have gone back to Thoreau's manuscripts and have republished his works with his original punctuation and style and spellings and not any previous editorialship that there could have been, okay? And so this is a Princeton edition. It is the most accurate text for Walden. And they brought this out in paperback. You know, there is a hardback edition that's expensive, but they brought this out in paperback in 2004 to mark the 150th anniversary of the book. American author John Updike wrote the introduction for it, okay? Additionally, I think it feels good in the hands and it's got a nice heft to it. This next one is also a paperback, pretty basic. It's by Beacon Press, came out in 2017, another anniversary year. Nice little cute cabin there. Bill McKibben, environmentalist and professor up in Vermont, wrote the introduction and some light annotations for this edition for Beacon Press. And so his annotations are small and they're in footnotes at the bottom of the pages. We sell a lot of these. They feel nice. The text is nice. Me personally, I don't think I would buy a white book. I don't think I would buy an off-white. This is off-white. I don't think I would do that. Not sure I would put this in a backpack. I've only seen them new, so I don't know how they wear, okay? And absolutely, Bill McKibben's introduction is worth seeing and reading. But white, yeah, I'm not so sure. But we do sell a lot of copies of it. So thanks, Bill, for writing the introduction. Next up, what I call the little Tiffany Walden. Look how cute. 4x6, gilt edges on all the pages. Yeah. First came out in 2004, published in England, and then Macmillan brought it out a little after that. It has skinny pages like a book of scripture does. It has an afterword by Sam Gilpin. He wrote most of the biographies in this little collector's library series for the publisher. I don't have Sam Gilpin's credentials. Maybe you know him. This book is cute and nice, and we sell a lot of it. I think a lot of people get it for a gift for other people. It's portable. I'm not sure I would take it in the woods, but it's portable, and it's cute, and it's got gilt edges all the way around. Look at that. And it's got Daniel Rickardson's depiction of Henry on the back, in case you've never seen that. That's pretty cool. Daniel Rickardson, a friend of Thoreau's, a friend and fan of Thoreau's who lived in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Okay, next up, a paperback from Penguin Classics, has both Walden and Civil Disobedience in it. Yay. I think this is a good combination, like I said. And in this one, the introduction was written by Thoreau scholar and professor Kristen Case, who is based at the University of Maine at Farmington. This is a nice one, you know, has a nice artistic view of the cabin. It's nice, it's portable, it's paperback. Okay, the blue and white one, I always call it. but it's a lot more than that. It says the Illustrated Walden. See that? Thoreau Bicentennial Edition. Okay, so this one came out by Penguin Random House in 2016, but it is actually a reprint of what was deemed the first illustrated Walden. It came out in 1897, okay? Like I said before, Walden's not usually illustrated. Don't know why that is. But this one is, Cat is playing with toys again. Sorry about that. This one has 30 illustrations, which was a lot for the time, 30 black and white illustrations that are photographs from Concord native Alfred W. Hosmer, H-O-S-M-E-R, photographer. And he went around and took pictures of all kinds of things, took photographs of all kinds of things, including places where Thoreau went. He was one of the two main photographers from the turn of the last century who did that. The other is Herbert Gleason. You might have heard of him. For example, here's a picture of Thoreau's journal with his spyglass. So there's these old-timey pictures. Again, this is a reprint of the 1897 first illustrated Walden. And it has a nice introduction written by Bradford Torrey, T-O-R-R-E-Y. Now, if you've been around Thoreau stuff for a while, you're thinking, Bradford Torrey, why do I know that name? Ah, you should know that name. Before the turn of the last century, Bradford Torrey was an American nature writer. He's fallen out of favor now. We don't hear about him again. But after he did this Walden introduction for this first illustrated version in 1897, he went on to do something more famous to us. He was one of the editors of the 20-volume set of Writings of Henry David Thoreau that Houghton Mifflin Company published in 1906. That's where you know Bradford Torrey from. And if you saw my last episode where I talked about the Dover journals, that they gleaned those 14 volumes from the 20 in 1906, Bradford Torrey's name is on there too as one of the co-editors with Francis Allen. So there you go. But this is nice. This has a really nice feel to it. And we saw a lot of them at the shop, and the text is nice. And you've got those classic, and it's a reprint of a classic edition. Okay. All right. But what was considered well illustrated in 1897 by 21st century standards is kind of not as well illustrated as this one. This came out in 2017 from Sterling, and this is called The Illustrated Walden, and it is really well illustrated. Watercolors, all kinds of different, of course you can see pages that I'm finding that don't have it, all kinds of, there's a depiction of the Thoreau farm where Henry was born on Virginia Road in Concord, Massachusetts, July 12, 1817. All kinds of pictures, a variety, watercolors, engravings from that guy, Thomas Nason, that I told you about before in that 1939 one. Some of his are in here. So all kinds of, and it's pretty, and it's hardback, it has a dust jacket, but when you take the dust jacket off, it looks exactly the same. Sometimes they do that with different engravings. Oh. I like that. Anyway, so like I said, Walden's not often illustrated. Those are two exceptions. So this one might appeal to you on that level. All right. Another Walden. This one is from the Everyman's Library. This one's nice. It has a dust jacket. It has nice text. It has an introduction by Verlin Klinkenborg, who is a contemporary nonfiction author who also lectures at Yale University. It also has a ribbon as a bookmark. This one's kind of got a classic feel to it. The last basic Walden that I want to show off is a coffee table book version by photographer Scott Miller. Please note, Scott Miller spells his first name with one T. Okay, Scott Miller, Walden. This one came out in 2004 for the 150th anniversary of Walden, okay, is a coffee table book that has beautiful photos. It has the full text of Walden, but it has beautiful photos from Walden. Of course, I turn to a page that doesn't have one. And I turn to another page that doesn't have one. There you go. There's Walden from the air. Okay, so this is by photographer Scott Miller. Scott Miller is also a videographer. In fact, if you watch CBS Sunday Morning on CBS on Sunday morning, you may have seen his work and not know it. If you wait for the moment of nature in the last minute of the show, look at the credits of the videographers. Sometimes it's Scott Miller, and sometimes it's footage of Walden that he took years ago. So pay attention to that, besides the fact that that's a beautiful moment on television. CBS Sunday Morning, yeah, look for Scott Miller. In this edition, there is an introduction by Don Henley of the Eagles. Now again, if you're familiar with this realm, you understand the connection. If you don't, about 30 years ago, Don Henley got involved with the whole Thoreau and Walden realm because there was development planned for several properties around the Walden Pond State Reservation. And there was a protest group protesting it and got coverage on CNN, and Don saw it out in California and or Texas, wherever he was, and offered to help. So, I stuttered there a little bit, offered to help. And so he offered to help, like I said, and eventually what happens with that is, yes, they were successful in stopping the development, and the Walden Woods Project is the group that came out of that. Don Henley and Ed Begley Jr. still sit on the board of the Walden Woods Project. They also are in charge of the Thoreau Institute, that's where that is, and curator Jeff Kramer, who I've mentioned before, and they're dedicated to education and conserving land and all that kind of stuff. And that I'll talk about them in more about them and Don in another episode. So those are the basic Waldens. Again, links to purchase them if you want to, or more information about them are on travelswiththoreau.com. We'll go to bibliography and then go to editions of Walden, because that's what I named it. So that was the basic Waldens, but now we are advancing to annotated Waldens, okay? There have been 3 main annotated Waldens that came out in the last 50 years, all right? First one was compiled by Philip Van Doren Stern. Looks like this, or looks like this, depending on whether the publisher was Clarkson Potter or Barnes & Noble or Bramhall House, okay? The Annotated Walden by Philip Van Doren Stern. It is out of print, but I have links. I have a link on my bibliography to used book dealers that have it. It's often found at used book dealers for less than 20 bucks, and it's well worth the price, okay? Sometimes you find it without those dust jackets, and then it's not quite as pretty. An annotated edition means that somebody has gone through the whole text of the original book and has defined all of the references that might confuse us today. That includes Greek and Roman mythological references. That includes poetry snippets from English poets. You have absolutely no idea who they are. Cultural and literary references that Thoreau's audience were familiar with, but we, in the passage of time, don't have at our fingertips. The kind of things where you go over words and phrases as you're reading and you don't understand them, and you either stop to look them up or you plot ahead and you figure maybe I can figure out with context. That doesn't always work, okay? So wouldn't it be nice if somebody showed you what everything meant? Okay, so that's what an annotation one does. This first one, again, came out in 1970 from Philip Van Doren Stern. He was in publishing. He was an author, mostly of Civil War-related books. And here's my lovely favorite piece of transcendental trivia. He also wrote a short story one Christmas called The Greatest Gift that he sent around to friends and relatives as a Christmas card, and Frank Capra got a hold of it and turned it into the movie, It's a Wonderful Life. How about that? So that's your transcendental trivia for the day. Next Christmas when it comes on, or next time you call it up on your favorite video outlet, look at the credits, From a Story by Philip Van Doren Stern. And of course, in the darker reality of It's a Wonderful Life, when George Bailey goes off to find out what has happened to his once wife, Mary, what has happened? She's become a librarian. Oh no. But I digress. Okay. Besides being well annotated, this book has so many extras I can't even imagine. Has a 100-page biography at the beginning. And it also includes Civil Disobedience, which is also annotated in addition to Walden. But what really sells this thing are all of the illustrations, okay? There are engravings, and of course, as I turn pages, there are engravings. Don't you just love those old engravings? There are engravings, there are photographs, there are illustrations of all kinds, old-timey photographs, any kind of thing that he could think of. Now the text, Thoreau's text is in one column, and then the annotations are in the others. Look at all of these old-fashioned kind of, I just love that. I just love that. That's what makes a difference. And again, Walden's not usually illustrated. I've shown you probably the few that are, you know. If you want to do something new and exciting, kids, create an illustrated Walden that is new and exciting. That would be cool. Anyway, that's Philip Van Doren Stern, the annotated Walden. Came out in 1970. The second annotated Walden came out in 1995, and it was compiled by Walter Harding, who was the foremost Thoreau scholar of the 1900s and one of the founders of the Thoreau Society. Now, to be fair, this came out in 1995 from Houghton Mifflin, but to be fair, he had made a previous edition called the Variorum Walden. Practice saying that, the Variorum Walden, which means it's a variation. It came out in paperback and in hardback around 1962, one of those magical years. And so he defined things that he thought people didn't know, and he put them in endnotes at the end of the book. So you're reading along and you want to know what that is, then you have to turn to the end. That's not that much of a problem, but that's not what a true annotated one does. An annotated one puts the explanation right next to the text as much as it can. Now, Harding does include illustrations in his, and all of these come from Henry's journal. These are all original drawings from Henry Thoreau. Harding gives a quote and the citation so you know where they came from. Yay, because you might want to look them up. Okay? Excuse me. So that's Harding's annotated Walden. See if I want to say anything about that. I guess that's enough. But Harding was the Thoreau scholar for a long time, so he knew it all, or as much as he could know in his lifetime. Sorry. The newest and most heavily annotated Walden is compiled by Jeff Kramer, the curator of the Thoreau Institute at Walden Woods. It was published by Yale University Press in 2004. This is the most complete one we can get. And he does have some standard illustrations at the beginning. There's a picture of the replica. He's got a picture of Sophia's. He's got Sophia's. There's half of Henry's face. He's got pictures of a couple of illustrations. There's that Hosmer version of the daguerreotype from 1856. Anyway, this is a clean look with Henry's text in the middle and the annotations on the outside. It is heavily annotated. Now, if you think about it, this came out in 2004. Harding's came out in 1995. Van Doren Stern's came out in 1970. Those are really 3 decades of different kinds of research. Jeff had the advantage of electronic searching, not necessarily just the internet, but just electronic searching at all. I am not diminishing what Jeff did here because it's a fabulous book, and it's huge amount of work. I'm just saying that he could find things that Harding and Stern couldn't. And because if you think of it now, if you're researching something and you come upon a unique phrase that evidently was from some old book, and you don't know which old book, you can take that unique phrase, put it in quotes, and throw it into Google Books and hit search, and it'll probably come up with the page that was on originally in that old book. And you've got the citation there and everything. Searching is so much easier now than it was before. And I'm not diminishing what Stern and Harding did either, because you take into consideration their time. They had to go to libraries. They had to correspond with librarians, probably by mail or phone. They had to request interlibrary loan books that would have to come through the mail, instead of a local delivery system. If they didn't know the title of the book, if they didn't know where it came from, they could have been stuck, is the thing. So think about that when you're considering these 3 annotated editions. In full disclosure, I was asked a few years ago by a collaborator to help create a new edition of Walden and to write annotations for it. I wasn't sure I was up to the challenge, but I took it on. And so I created explanations, short ones, not like these, short ones that are going to be in the margins of this book when it's published. It hasn't been published yet. You'll be the first to know when it does. So I used resources in my own library and in libraries around me and online and what I could find. I also had these 3 books. I had the advantage. I had these 3 books around me so that if I got stuck, I could see what each one of these 3 guys said. And I can tell you from that experience, these are all 3 individual books, okay? They didn't necessarily build one on the other. These are 3 separate books written by 3 separate people doing 3 separate periods of research, at 3 different kind of times, okay? There were times when I disagreed with all 3 of them and created my own annotation. There were times when I could figure out which one maybe had more truth on their side or more proof on their side. But they are not the same. They're not copycats of each other. They don't build necessarily on each other. So that might be something that you want to think about. If you're a Thoreau fan and you want to know more about the way Thoreau wrote and how extensive his knowledge was and how he wrote those details into his own writing and wove them in so perfectly as a masterful creative writer. If you're a Thoreau fan, you probably want one of these annotated editions, and it might not matter which one, although the Van Doren Stern has the most pictures. If you are a literary scholar and you want to analyze every single paragraph in that book and you want to know what everybody said, then you're going to want all 3, okay? You might want to borrow them from a library first just to get a sense of the way they are and whether you really do need them all 3. But like I said, they all shed extensive light on how Thoreau wove his knowledge into these perfectly mastered paragraphs. So I recommend at least getting one of them, okay? So to recap, we have basic or annotated. We have hardbacks, we have paperbacks. Who wrote the introduction? Pay attention to that. Where did it come from? The book itself. Is it representative of what you thought? If you go to a different place and you buy the book, did it come from that place? Is that what you wanted? Like buying the book up in Quebec. So these are some criteria to consider when you're buying your own copy of Walden. Or, you know what? You could, where is it? Now I don't even know. You could just go with pretty, and there's nothing wrong with going with pretty, okay? It has to feel good to you. It has to be what you want, right? if you want to see more Waldens, even more Waldens than what I've shown you, you may want to check out waldenthebook.com. Okay, this is a website by Thoreau fan Brian Rubinoff, a friend, but a Thoreau fan, and he spent one whole year collecting as many editions of Walden as he could. And then what he did at the end was he made this website and a database of the Waldens that he's found. He's got 137 of them on there, all different, with descriptions of where, you know, the publication. He's in the library business, so he's got the full citations in there. He also has made it easy for you to add more if you know of other editions that are not already on that site. Like I said, I know Brian. I once wrote an article about him and his Walden project and the wall of Waldens he has in his house. Once wrote an article about that for the Thoreau Society Bulletin in the fall of 2012. So you might want to check that out. But yeah, more Waldens than you could ever even imagine. And remember, all of the books that I showed you, the bibliography is on travelswiththoreau.com. Okay. My name's Corrine Smith. I'm producing this series on my own. If you find it helpful, you might want to subscribe to the channel or leave a thumbs up below or a comment below or ring the bell up there, and then you can get notifications the next time I present an episode, which you never know. Might be in a week, it might be a little later. So until next time, have a thoroughly wonderful day, guys. Thanks.